Sukkah Perek Hey Halacha Chav Daled. Aval Shnei Amudim. We're talking about if someone is sleeping on a bed and he has two posts. Sheporas Alein Saden. He spread about on them a sheet. We'll go to the Peirush. He puts one in the middle of the bed at the bottom at his head, and one of them at the middle of the bed at his feet. He places on them a sheet, and it goes down at an angle like a tent. And above there's no roof, even the width of a tevach, v'chein kilo, or what's called a canopy, that doesn't have a canopied bed that doesn't have it at the top a roof, which is a wider tevach. Afilu gvoyin kol shehen, even if they are as big as they might be, mutalishon tachteim b'sukkah. One may sleep under them in a sukkah. She'ena kesukkah b'tech sukkah. It's not called a sukkah within a sukkah because it does not have a roof. And when you put four posts at the bed in the four corners and you spread upon it a sheet, so there is a width of a tevach. And if they're 10 tefachim, it's a sukkah b'tech sukkah. The Magen Mishnah cites the Mishnah that if you placed on these posts, it's possible. But if you can put it on the neklite mito, which means two, we'll see in the sukkah. What in the Brisa is neklitin is two, like we find in Halacha Dalet. Knuf is arba, kufnuf is four, like in the end of Halacha Gimel. The Brisa concludes if you put on top of four, it's possible, and two, it's kosher, but you have to make sure that it should not be higher than 10 tefachim. You can sleep only the naklitin that are not higher than 10 tefachim. So the question from here on the din kilo of Halacha Gimel, that if it's a tefach and 10 tefachim, you need both things to make it. You shouldn't sleep there. But if there's no roof of a tefach, even if it's 10 tefachim high, it should not make any difference, whether or not. And the Gemara distinguishes between many aspects. The Magen Mishnah questions. The Rambam and the Riv make similar a kilo, which is a canopy, a 2 and 4, and they don't mention the differences that I mentioned in the Gemara. The Baal HaMeir says naklitin is 10 tefachim high, knufias are not 10 tefachim high, and since they are permanent, you shouldn't sleep under them. Like the Riv, who leaves out the differences that are in the Gemara. The Magen Mishnah answers that this is according to the opinion of somebody who says that a sukkah that's made like a tzrif, that it's from the ground till the wall there is a incline the entire time. It's just a shack, and the roof and that wall is schach, and above 10 tefachim you have 7 tefachim of space underneath it. That's called a permanent structure. But La Halacha, he writes that sukkah that's made like a tzrif is possible because it is permanent, like in Perek Dal Halacha Zayin, and if it's part of a tent, it's not the angle of the tent is not like the tent itself, even though they're permanent, both the kula and the chumrah. Like the Gos Maimonides, that the sugya there is referring to this type of an angle, and the Mishnah that says that the angle of a tent is like an angle is only the opinion of an individual. The Halacha is not like him. We should emphasize that there's what's a kula, what's leniency, and what's stringency. That if we say that the angle of a tent is like a tent, you can't sleep under a sheet which is spread out on posts, even if they're not 10 tefachim high. That's the stringency. The leniency is that if somebody makes a sukkah at an angle, like we said, against the wall, even though it doesn't have a gag of a tefach, it's kosher. Because if it's not like an oihel, meaning that's a permanent structure, it's possible. The Rambam it should be Pastels because it's not like an oil. Also, nakliton, they are like the angle of an tent, because it doesn't have a gag of a tefach. In the sugi that says if you make a sukkah at an angle, you do not fulfill your obligation, is of the opinion that the angle of a tent does not cause it to be a tent, and therefore you can sleep under a nakliton, which does not have a roof of a tefach, because it's not a separate tent. It doesn't matter; it's 10 tefachim high. And like he wrote in Halacha, here in Halacha Gimel, that if you put 4 amudim, you place on it sheets, and if the 10 tefachim high, it's like then it becomes a tent within a tent. Even though there is a roof that's a tefach wide, if they're not 10 tefachim, you can sleep under it because it's not a tent. The Magen Mishnah says that there were goinim who said you can't even sleep under such if it has a tefach with and it's 10 tefachim high, you can't sleep under it. But if it has 4 posts and they're permanently there, if it's 10 tefachim high, then that's what decides the issue. The fact whether it's a width of a tefach on top or not does not cause it to differentiate with its kosher or posel. Therefore, you shouldn't sleep under them, even if the gag is not a tefach wide. The Mishnah questions where the Rambam come to say that if there is a roof, if it's not 10 tefachim high, you can sleep there. When the sugya would seem the Magen Mishnah mentions, which is the Halacha, right? It's possible because it's considered like a permanent item. And in fact, the Ramban in the Milchamois is of the opinion, like the Rif, that even if it's less than a tefach above, it's possible. If as long as it's high, 10 tefachim, because that's considered a permanent structure. The Mishnah explains that since by nakliton the sugya is pushed off, it's only because they are permanent parts of the bed. Even if they're not high, you shouldn't sleep under them, even if they don't have a tefach, because they are considered like a bed, and therefore it's permanent. However, when he says what they say, therefore one should not sleep even if it's at an angle of a tent, you shouldn't sleep under them, is not la halacha. Therefore, the Rambam paskins that only if they're 10 tefachim high, you shouldn't sleep under them, and not when they're less than 10 tefachim. And they don't, as long as they don't have a roof of 1 tefach. The Mishnah argues on the words of the Magen Mishnah that he brings from the Goinim to say that if it's 10 tefachim high, the post that the gag doesn't make a difference, because if they are of the opinion like the Gemara in Daf Yudam and Beis, they should have made posel the kilo only when it's 10 tefachim high and the gag of a tefach. Nakliton, he's posted it permanently in the bed, should be posel by 10 tefachim, even without a tefach. And bikinufis, even if they're not 10 tefachim high, since they're part of the bed, if it's 4, then it's posel. But what they wrote that when he writes that if it's 2 and they don't have a roof, the roof doesn't make a difference, is not like the sugi and Daf Yud, not like Daf Yud Tes. Therefore, he says that according to the Goinim, they had a problem that Toises questions. It would seem, we learn that if you put 4 amudim, you spread on them a sheet. Certainly, there's a gag of a tefach. You can't have 4 amudim without a gag of a tefach. And therefore, why did the Gemara question what's the difference between them? A kilo, there's no gag, there's no roof. And a knufias, there is. Therefore, they're going to explain that knufias, there's no roof. And they're like liton, which are 2 in the center. El shanikton are 2, and not that strongly embedded as in the bed. And the knufias are from all 4 sides, like posts, and they are part of the bed, a canopied bed. But in actuality, a sheet that is spread over on 4 pieces of wood, if it doesn't have a gag of a tefach, it would be fine. The difference is only that knufias are 4 and the kliton are 2. And this sugi is of the opinion that shipui oilolam ka'oiholam, something that's permanently slanted is just like the slanted at like a permanent structure, and that's the reason you shouldn't sleep under the knufias. The Goinim push off this sugya, like the Magen Mishnah, the Shittas Rambam, because in Daf Yutes it says shipui oilolam lav ka'oiholam, that you can use an angled wall as a sukkah, and if that's the case, therefore it's not considered a permanent structure. Therefore, the two pieces of wood which have over it the sheet that doesn't have a tefach width on top, we say shipui olam lav ka'olam, and they hold that beknufias, when it's 4 to 10 tefachim, it's possible because they don't have a roof, because they are permanent parts of the bed. If they're 10 tefachim high, you shouldn't sleep underneath them. Go to the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch paskins. Shulchan Aruch paskins that the trees, the woods, come out from the 4 posts of the bed. You cannot spread on it a sheet and sleep under it, even if they're not 10 tefachim high. But if one of them goes out in the middle of the bed at the top, and the other one at its feet, and places, in other words, it's an angle the whole way from the top to the bottom, and he put on it a piece of wood from one end to the other, you can spread a sheet on it and sleep under it, because you have no width of a tefach on top, but it can't be 10 tefachim high. Not like the Rambam, who says they can be even 10 tefachim high. So you have to talk about where there's only 2 posts, because otherwise you'll have a roof of a tefach. And he continues, but there are those who say even if it's 10 tefachim high, it's permitted, whether it's 4 or whether it's 2. That's like the Rambam. The Mishnah Berurah concludes that there's 3 concepts. There's a canopy, two boards and 4 boards, and he goes and explains it. And he explains a kilo, since it's not permanent, it's possible only if it has a gag which is a tefach and it's high 10 tefachim. Knufya, which are permanent, apostle, even if they're not 10 tefachim high, because they have a gag of a tefach. And the Pri Megadim questions, is it possible not Torah or not? Nakliten, even though they're not permanent, still they are more permanent than the canopy. Therefore, with the Rabbanon, it's possible when they are high 10 tefachim, even though they have no roof. Now, according to this first thought, and the second thought is the Rambam. Even the Rabbanon didn't forbid if it's 10 tefachim high when there's no tefach, because shipui oiholim, the angle of a tent does not, even if it's permanent, does not cause it to be a permanent structure of a tent, and therefore it's not an oil b'toich oil, it's not a sukkah b'toich sukkah.